Hello, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Tim Sudano, your favorite paranormal investigator. Welcome to the show. With me today, I have Eric and Justin from ParaTruth, Reborn, another show here on the UPRN network. And we're super excited to have them on today. And this is going to be part 2 of our discussion about all things paranormal investigation and what other sundry subjects happen to come up. So, without further ado, allow me to welcome them to the show. Here they are, Eric and Justin. Welcome.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
You were so kind to give me such a lengthy introduction, but and I appreciate that. Unfortunately, I didn't call up those parts for you in time. I had the opportunity, but so that just gives us more time to actually get into what's going on. So you two were on, or either were on or are on a paranormal investigation team aside from your podcast duties. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yep. Once upon a time, we actually had a team. Now, if I'm out where Eric is, we do one by ourselves, and vice versa. If he's out here with me in North Dakota, we do something here too.
That's a bit of a distance. I didn't realize you guys that. Yeah.
Yeah, I grew up in Cleveland,
Don't you have
Ohio.
A couple states in between you?
Nothing but a little walk, you know.
Yeah.
No, we both grew
I'm
up
trying
in
to think of the map of the United States in my head. I'm thinking, what's the coast there? Ohio's over here.
Yeah. It's roughly an 18 to 19 hour drive.
If you're lucky.
If you're lucky, from here to there. But yeah, we both grew up in Cleveland. I'm back in Cleveland now. I was in Virginia and Atlanta for several years. But he moved to North Dakota. I forget how many years ago. It's
been 15 years.
15, oh my goodness!
Wow.
that feels that makes me feel old.
I mean, let's face it, we're both getting up there in age.
We're getting close. But yeah, no. So when he was living in Cleveland, we had this investigative team called Night Stalkers, Paranormal Society.
You guys were the Night Stalkers?
Yeah.
I know your team. Yeah, man. I've heard of you guys.
And so we had a full team. It was going really great. And then it just so happened that Justin ended up moving to North Dakota for a couple of different reasons. But when that happened, we kind of disbanded the team. I tried to do it myself, and I'm not the organizer of the team here. That's really Justin's thing,
Let's just say Justin tries to get most of the guests for the shows.
I'm the creative here. He's definitely the, But yeah, so that
I feel your pain.
But it's cool. Like, it was fun having the investigative team. We did a lot of stuff. We did, as we said on our show, Jeffrey Dahmer's house, childhood home. So we're the first investigative team there. We did this place called Ghost Alley, which is a haunted bowling alley here in Ohio. In what was that? I want to say it's a Stowe area. Anyone in Ohio who's listening, you would know where that is probably.
And I don't believe it's actually named Ghost Alley, right?
It's not named, but that's just what it's called because it's so haunted. Which there's some funny stories with that we could get into a little later.
Yeah,
sure.
But then we've done a couple of home residents as well, both on site, and I've done some work with people off site, just through telephone communication, basically demonic hauntings, in which I would reach out and we would talk things through, and I would help them out.
Okay.
In whatever way was beneficial for the individual, for the client.
Gotcha.
But yeah, now it's just, if we're together, we go out and do stuff. There's a lot of places in Cleveland. There's a lot of places in North Dakota that are really great places for some investigative work. A lot of ghost towns out there, and just a lot of history here in Cleveland. So it's always fun doing stuff like that for sure.
Right on. I'm going to work backwards from I'm going to use some of your questions that you asked me on the other portion of this.
Oh, you're cheating.
What was? Yeah, totally cheating. You asked some good questions. Like, why didn't I think of that? But what was the case that stands out? One that just blows your hair back every single time you think or hear of it.
I'd have to say the Jeffrey Dahmer house.
That's the one we always refer to.
What was the place that we did where we saw the Reaper?
Rockefeller Center.
That one was pretty good too. We had a couple of different things there. Nothing as good as the Jeffrey Dahmer house, but we ended up having a picture at the Rockefeller Center, and we had looked at it. We had the other team look at it, and we thought we had what looked like kind of like a Grim Reaper on a photo. Years later, technology has advanced. Eric has started his degree in cinematography, and he just randomly looks at this picture, picks it apart, and he's like, dude, you remember that picture? And I'm like, yeah. It's like, it was a freaking bush. I'm like, what? We told the client there was a skeleton type thing in your business complex, and thankfully we had no contact with that client after that. But yeah, for me, by far, Jeffrey Dahmer's house was probably the best investigation we've ever done.
The best, man.
Yeah, I didn't feel so bad anyway, knowing like the other investigative teams we've been working with at that time also saw it and thought, oh yeah, that's definitely like a Reaper type spirit, you know.
I hear you.
But yeah, dude, once I got my iMac and everything was clear all of a sudden, it was like seeing light for the first time. I was like, oh man, this is.
I've had a couple of those
that
myself.
is way off.
Yeah.
But yeah, Jeffrey Dahmer's. Let's get into that a little bit.
Let's do it.
So first and foremost, like just the location in and of itself, right? So this is the place that not only did he grow up in, but it's the house that he killed Stephen Hicks at. So for those who don't know the story of Stephen Hicks and how he was killed, Dahmer happened to run into him at like a bar and invited him back to his house in Bath, Ohio. And at one point during the night in his garage, Stephen turned his head, like turned away, and Dahmer picked up a dumbbell and just beat him over the head until he was dead. And once he did that, he dragged him to this little cubby under the house where he chopped him up into little pieces, separated the bones from his flesh, or flesh from his bones, and then stored him into various black plastic bags, garbage bags, and then scattered the remains throughout the backyard. So first and foremost, extremely violent
Friday night
place, right? Exactly.
Yeah.
Jeez, man.
And it happened to be Friday night in this case.
Right. I didn't even know that.
Yeah. So, there's one thing for me that I really wanted to do. I wanted to get under that cubby where he separated the flesh and all that. Like, yeah, I got to be there. But before we even did that, we did what most investigators do. We did a little tour of the property, get an idea of the layout of the land and of the house itself.
Fine. Yeah.
And I believe the owner was there with us and the tenant that was renting from, which was the reason we were there in the first place.
Mm-hmm. Right. Let me pause you right there, just to educate everyone out in the world that, unlike on the TV shows, we don't have budgets to put the clients up in hotels where we get a whole place to ourselves.
Right.
The clients are usually there with us, and it's actually okay because they can double as living trigger objects, and they can also inform us a little bit more. I mean, we kind of get them out of the way. If they want to come with us, for me, that's fine. But we cannot extract or, shove the clients out of the room. Go spend the night over at grandma's place for the night. That doesn't really happen. Not in reality. I'm sorry. Please continue.
No, yeah. And in this case, it was kind of weird because our client, he was there, but he decided to go to sleep around midnight. So he went to his room and shut the door.
That's right. Yeah.
Like, hey guys, can you just be quiet, please, as you're doing the investigation? And that was it. We didn't see him until like 5 or 6 o'clock the next morning. But it's okay, cool. But anyways, we're scoping out the property, and there's this little trail in the backyard. It's just a bunch of trees in the backyard. And so we're taking this trail and walking around this tree, and it was about dusk at this point. And I just so happened to notice out the corner of my eye this nail about 2 inches long sticking out of the tree that almost caught the corner of my eye. And I like jumped back and just, I was like, well, that's weird. It's a nail. But then as I was sitting there looking at it, it dawned on me. Jeffrey Dahmer, when he was a kid, he used to capture squirrels and frogs, and he would nail them onto the trees when he was a kid.
Stray cats as well.
Stray cats, and he would dissect them and do all these horrible things.
Good times.
And I did, I kind of backtracked, did the math here, and realized that if that nail had been put in at roughly, if he was the age of 8 or so, that course of time between then and when we were investigating and that tree grew, that nail would have grown with the tree.
Yeah.
So this nail was great possibility that this nail was put there by Dahmer himself.
Oh.
And, at the time I wasn't a collector of weird items. Today I am. So I kind of wish I had that nail, because I would have just plucked that thing out and like, this is coming home with me. But yeah, so, that was something that just right off the bat was like, that's crazy. Like, that's kind of cool. Also kind of creepy. But then the rest of the night, when we got into the investigation itself, it got weird real fast. For me personally, I mean, aside from just various experiences, just feelings that many investigators get, you tend to feel things at times, but you don't capture anything on any of our tools. But there was this one bedroom that I was staying in. It was his bedroom at the time when he was a kid. And I was sitting in the corner of this bedroom, and we have other investigators outside, and I'm making sure no one's around when I'm asking questions. But the very first EVP I got, I call out and I say, hey, if you're here, whoever's here, if there's anyone here, my name's Eric, what's your name? And within 2 seconds, I get a response, and it just goes, Eric, like that.
And I was like, on playback, right?
I got it. Caught it on playback.
Okay.
And dude, it just sent chills up my spine, because I was in there by myself. Yeah. There's nobody outside at the time. There was no one in the other room, and this was literally like the voice was in the device. It was right there next to me, clear as day.
Okay.
And I played this back so many times, like, could this be anything at all? Am I exhaling? Is there somebody outside? Is it, whatever? Yeah. But no. Time and time again, it's just something repeating my name in a very exaggerated way. And it was insane. But that was like my first classic EVP I ever captured. So it was like, dude, of all places to capture one, that's a good place to do it.
Yeah, dude. That's amazing. That's amazing. I had a very similar experience. We were investigating a legend. Now, mind you, I've told this story on my show 1,000 times. So the legend didn't have a paper trail, no police reports, no nothing. And this legend was this guy jumped off the second story of this theater that's on a college campus near me and killed himself. He went head first because he was denied by his girlfriend when he proposed marriage.
Oh, geez.
So that legend stuck for decades. This was in the 70s when this was supposed to happen. No paper trail, no police reports, nothing. So it's a safe first investigation just to kind of test the waters. I have these two, I call them junior psychics. There's these two young ladies who were with us on our first case. And she has a voice recorder. I have the camera on her, and there's a second camera over like a distance away. We're at the entry point to this theater where this kid came down, and she asked the question, is there anyone here with us? And on playback you hear, and her name is Farah, by the way, the voice says, I'm right next to you, Farah. We died on that forever, man. That was the best thing in the world.
I mean, how I'm sorry.
Please continue.
That's awesome.
Yeah, man.
In that same room is where you saw the gold orb with your eyes.
There was, So in that same room, I can't remember if it was before or after the EVP was caught, but there was this gold orb that appeared kind of in the opposite corner of the room from me, and it just kind of moved across the wall and out the door. And it was enough where I had to get up. I stood up and walked out there to see, like, with my eyes playing tricks on me. And of course, I tried to debunk it. Again, we have other investigators investigating outside. But, the windows are clear. There's no like stained glass windows or anything like that. No curtains on the windows. Everyone using lights. We're using white lights, the solid bright white, not the incandescent style yellow color. So I
Gotcha.
debunked that as well. And at the time, like I even reached out and was like, hey, is anybody at the side, this portion of the house outside this room? And everyone responded, no, nobody's there. It's like, okay, cool. So at least it's not a mistake in that case, not mistaken identity in this case, right?
Right.
So, I followed it out and there was nothing. It just the house. That's it. Just whatever it was there, and then it wasn't. Which is always frustrating because, like, I didn't have the camera running, of course.
Yeah, of course.
You never knew. Whenever you tell me about anything, you're like, oh, I didn't have my camera out.
I'm one of those horrible people that we just despise on like YouTube channels and stuff. Where they're like, oh, all this happened, but I have no evidence of it whatsoever. I'm one of those people.
Yeah, same.
Unfortunately.
Yeah.
I mean, I can't say that I'm not, because I've seen what to me was a UFO because I didn't know what it was, couldn't capture it, but I'm telling Eric about it, and he's like, "Did you get a picture or a video?" No, I was driving at the time, and a lot of his were driving at the time too. So it's like, I mean,
Yeah.
I'd love to just bust out my camera on my phone, but
we need those driving those cameras in the cars, on the dash cams,
Yeah,
Dash
we
cams,
just need them at all 4 points of the car, so we're seeing everything around
Totally.
us at all times.
I like it.
But at that same place, we had a guy who was on the other team who was a psychic. He was also a shaman, and he saw a floating torso. Again, as far as I'm aware, didn't catch it on camera or anything like that. We brought it up on our other show. We were doing a ghost box session. At the time, I didn't have an external speaker, just some headphones. And I was splitting it where it would at least record the ghost box, and then also people could hear it. And the person was on the other team, was listening, and just I forget all the questions, but we're like, is somebody here? And the gal said yes. I'm like, okay, well, prove it. If you're here, touch one of us. And I get a caress on my neck, and I'm like, yep, yeah, he's here. Whoever is here, I just got touched. I'm gonna go outside for a few minutes.
Peace.
You guys stay. It's okay. I'll be all right. And we had people out there because we were swapping back and forth anyways at this point, because this was towards the end of the investigation. But I came back in around the time that Eric had brought up. They were talking, and then all of a sudden this diary got brought up because it was heard on the ghost box, and that was presented to the client before we had done any thorough investigation into any of the evidence, which kind of miffed both me and Eric, because it's like, yeah, you just don't do that. We also had somebody on our team. Luckily, this didn't get spread out before we could say, no, we're not presenting that. He had caught a mirror and had manipulated the picture enough where it looked like there was like this sparkle coming through the mirror. And he's like, look, there's a portal. And we're looking, and I'm like, dude, like,
wow.
Yes, that's super interesting, but you've manipulated this picture so much that even if it was evidence, we can't present this as evidence because you've manipulated it so much. He had also manipulated his camera to Eric, you explained this part so much better than I do, but basically to capture things, and he would get streaks in his camera, light streaks in his camera, and stuff like that.
He purposely slowed down the shutter speed. So it would hold the shutter open for 3 to 5 seconds when you stopped the photo. So everything was always showing light streaks. And mind you, we eventually booted this dude from the team, because that was the first time he did this, where he took a photo and wanted to show the client without us first looking it through. But there's another investigation we did at a bar one night, and unfortunately he took photos, had all these light streaks, and then immediately, without letting me, Justin, or any of the other members of our team know, went straight to the client and started flipping through his photos, showing him like, look, this is because a ghost is passing through. Look, this is, and yeah, we that was a line that was crossed that we're like, dude, no, that's not how we run this team. We're professionals.
You don't run an investigation like that in the first place. I mean, that's what
and then of course he was frustrated. He's like, I'm the best investigator on this team. You're gonna boot me? Like, okay, bro.
Okay,
we hired you, dude. Get out of here. But yeah, we had that kind of a couple of experiences like that, unfortunately, at this Dahmer house. But not too many like that. Thankfully, a lot of it is pretty legit. When I was in the cubby, I spent a lot of time under that cubby. And I'm one of those people who naturally is drawn to the darker side of things.
Okay.
For example, I lived prior to living in Savannah, I lived in Savannah, Georgia too, for a short period. We went on my sisters and I went on a paranormal tour, or a ghost tour. And one of the last spots they took us to was this place called the Hangman's Tree. And it was believed that there was this dark entity, like this black, just solid black entity that would always hang around this tree and show itself to people who were passing by, and people would touch this tree. Like one person had touched this tree, went home on a motorcycle, and they wrecked a motorcycle, him and his girlfriend. Wow. There have been a number of illnesses from people touching this tree, and things like that. Mm-hmm. And so naturally, who's the idiot who's standing there, who hears all this stuff, is like, oh, yeah, I'm gonna just touch that tree right there, right? And of course, my sisters, they knew it and they saw it. It was too quick, they weren't fast enough, and all you hear is Eric, and everybody turns to look, and now I'm like the center of attention, holding this tree, and I'm like, I can't explain it. I was just I was drawn in. But so because of that, with the Dahmer house, I was always under this cubby because that's where he cut Stephen Hicks up and separated the flesh and the bone, and I didn't catch anything under there, but the experience was pretty intense because at first it was just a normal night.
I imagine the vibe down there was pretty.
Yeah, and it was out in the open. It was pretty filled up at this point. It used to be really a big open area, but they filled it in with dirt and gravel. But there was still enough space where you can get underneath the floorboards and just kind of hang out under there. But, as I'm sitting there asking questions or just trying to, in a way, meditate in the area, the air became thicker and heavier, became intensely hot, and which you would think, you're under a floor, but I was right there next to the door. It's not I'm 20 feet from this door. It's literally a 2-foot walk from the place I was to this door, and it's 50 degrees outside. And so, everything just changed. The atmosphere changed. You get that heavy thickness in your chest. It's hard to breathe. Start to get, I'm sensitive to negative energy in particular. So I get headaches when I'm around anything that's negative. And so that happened. And it was a lot of that happening throughout the night here and there for me. And I will say, when it came to his house, I think the experiences that we had very much outweighed the evidence collected. But as a paranormal investigator who we're there for two reasons: one, to help the client, and two, we want to learn, right? And for us, even though we couldn't present enough evidence to say, look, we think this is 100% haunted, it was enough for us to walk away, but there's something up with that place. There's something happening there.
What was the client's claims specifically? I'm curious to know about that because, it's the Dahmer house. You'd think that you'd see some pretty visceral stuff.
Yeah. I'm trying to remember. I know there was shadows moving. Was there other stuff?
He was witnessing shadows move. He was noticing lights being turned on and off. Things being misplaced, supposedly moved from wherever he left them.
Gotcha.
Okay. But he was also, and I don't. Unfortunately, there are individuals out there who are like this. We were the first team to go there, and thankfully, it didn't come out of our wallet. But one of the teams we were collaborating with, they had to pay a fee to go and investigate for him as well. For pay the owner the client wanted information, but the owner said, "Oh no, wait, nope, can't have people coming into this house." And
Well, he wanted this footage for a documentary he wanted to do
as
too.
well.
Oh,
which never got made.
all right.
Right.
I kind
By
of
him.
that.
Yeah.
But-
So it was one of those deals, which, for, again, Justin and I were like, hey, this is a free shot to get into Dahmer's house. We're in. Let's go.
Yeah.
And like since
Absolutely.
then, that house has been used for plenty of things, for documentaries. It was used in My Friend Dahmer, which is a Netflix TV show. They actually filmed at that house. So there has been a lot of media there since we were Headfirst Investigating.
Yeah, because I don't think there's
Gotcha.
anybody living in it right now.
No, not anymore. Which isn't a bad thing for those who want to try to get in.
I'm going to say that's a plus
Yeah.
for sure.
I do have to say, when it went up for sale, I seriously considered buying it, but for the price they were wanting for it, I'm like,
Yeah.
probably
Now,
not.
where is Dahmer's house again? Is it out in the sticks or is it in the suburb? Or
Yeah, Bath, Ohio. It's southwest.
It's roughly 25
Cleveland?
minutes south of Cleveland.
okay, so is it on a larger
It's-
piece of property then?
It's
or-
on a slightly larger piece of property.
Yeah.
So right next to it is kind of like a state park. So there's like there's a street, but also a hiking trail right over there
Yep.
as well, like a cement walking trail. But the closest house next to it is, goodness, I don't know, probably like around 40, 50 yards from it. So you're relatively secluded for the most part, and again, it's surrounded by trees, so you don't have a lot of light pollution or anything like that happening. But yeah, and like in Cleveland,
Okay.
Cleveland is really big for its national parks.
Yeah.
The Cuyahoga Valley National Park is, at least was last year, the third rated the third best national park in the country,
All right.
which is saying a lot considering how
That's
many
All the
national
parks we have, yeah.
So, and this is kind of like just butted right up against the national park system.
Nice.
So, you'll be in Cleveland. It's all very urban. Go out a little bit. Like I live in the suburbs of Cleveland. But then you got a little further and you're in this open land. We got a lot of farmland out here as well. We got the national parks that take up a significant amount of real estate, which is really cool too. If you're getting into like, stuff about Bigfoot or the Dog Man, things like that. We have all those legends here as well.
That's
So
awesome.
that's pretty cool.
Yeah. That is pretty cool. So you go to the Dahmer house, you see all this fun stuff fun stuff. I say colloquially, but yeah, I mean, you caught some interesting things for sure. Now, were you convinced it was Dahmer messing with you? Did he come back to that site, or do you think something else was at play? Do you think maybe Dahmer was influenced? Did you get that far into the investigation?
I personally don't think it was Dahmer. I think it was something else there.
Yeah.
Aside from maybe the floating torso that one of the other investigators saw, that's very possibly could have been Hicks, considering we know what had happened to him. But no, I mean, this was, there's like a dark energy around human spirits at times. If they're negative people, if they're quote unquote evil people, but it's a very different experience when there's a dark entity, something that isn't necessarily human. And I'm not saying it was demonic per se. I've dealt with quite a few demonic entities, unfortunately. And I would tell you it wasn't quote unquote demonic, but it was definitely something that wasn't quite human. And if it was just really feeding off of the atmosphere and creating some serious energy.
I had one of the other investigators that we were with ask. We were doing a separate ghost session before the ending one, and they asked, do you feel it's Dahmer? And I'm like, I don't think so. I don't feel that he's here at all. But I will say this, after the investigation was done, I took Eric home. We were wrapping up, saying goodbye. I went to my car and I was just feeling off. I felt like something was off. And I'm like, if there's any spirits here with me right now, you are not allowed in this car. You are not allowed to go home with me. You've got to leave. And, did the white light, did a prayer, and audibly in my ear, I hear, and of course, no equipment going because we are wrapped up for the morning. Right. I hear goodbye, Justin, and I'm like,
good.
Okay, I brought something home with me. Luckily, nothing happened. After I said, you're not allowed to come with me. Whatever. I went home. Nothing happened. But
Justin has a history of picking up very weird individuals, so it doesn't surprise me that he
and also on a couple of investigations, taunting spirits to try and get them to do something. This was well before maturity in investigations. Luckily, also not in anybody's home. We were in a national park, and I'm taunting what people had deemed the Wraith, quote unquote, the Wraith. And everybody else was out doing their own thing. And then I taunted it, and it felt like something was like grabbing my chest, like digging their fingers into my chest. And looking back, I'm like, you were so stupid. You were so stupid. And you were so infantile in your sensitivity, because I had kind of started pursuing mediumship at that point, to think that you being a medium is going to stop something from hurting you. And if I could go to myself back then and be like, stop it, no. But at the Dahmer house, I don't think any of us had done any provoking or anything, because we knew what was happening there. So
I do want to add, though, that story that Justin just told, it was at a place called Indigo Lake, which is, as you said, part of the national park here, Cuyahoga Valley National Park. We mostly used a ghost box, and there was some weird stuff happening, and we would ask questions, and this is where the name Wraith came in. And I would ask things like, what do you want? And it would be very just gruesome with things like, I want blood, guts, stab, stuff like that. Would keep saying, yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
You sure it wasn't Dahmer?
Yeah.
Well, I believe at this site is where a Native American massacre happened as well.
Okay.
But, yeah. So, but we had a lot of that audio being captured. So it was really creepy for sure. Yeah. But the only photo that we got, and we took a bunch of photos, but only one thing showed up. Sorry, my cat is just.
It's your cat. It's not a shadow person. It's a kitty.
The one photo that we took, which happened to be pretty deep into the park, was just. And mind you, there's no lights in a national park. It's dark. We might use flash, of course, when we're out there, which we did. But there was this really weird green mist hovering over the ground right next to us. Can't explain what it was. No other photo had that green mist, even though we always took multiple shots at the same spot just to protect whatever it is we're taking. We have things to debunk, or if we see any discrepancies in anything, we'd be like, okay, cool, so this is debunked or this isn't. And in this case, there's this green mist hovering next to us in this park while all this stuff is happening, and no other photo picked it up. So to this day, I don't know what it was. I don't know how it would have manifested as a green mist if it was natural. Unless it was some sort of bioluminescent. Yeah, it was like weird. But that was the only thing we got from that investigation.
Yeah.
That's intriguing. That's really intriguing, actually.
Yeah.
Gotta go back there. I'll join you.
Yeah.
Wasn't split to Ohio. When you're out there and you're doing your investigations, are you, how do I put this? Are you going in prepared to okay, let me restate that. That didn't make sense. Of course you're prepared, but
never. It's just
never. No,
really,
you know what? I think I'm just walking to this random house and hey, you need ghost hunting done?
No. And we get random recordings like, why are you here? And we're like, we're supposed to be here.
It's our job, darn it. When are you I should say making preparations for yourself to be there. Like you mentioned the protection, the white light protection, the prayer, maybe that little prayer. My psychic, JJ, I mentioned her in the last show. She developed a protocol for us every time we go to investigation, and it would be to kind of ground ourselves, a little bit of minor meditation there, and we do the white light thing. You fill yourself with white light and project out, give yourself a little shield. She calls it bubbling.
Okay.
And it sounds silly to say loud, but it works because when we weren't doing it, and we were super lucky, Henry and I didn't practice any of that stuff. We just went in, hey, we have technology. We're going to solve this thing. Yeah. And, you were speaking earlier, Justin, of the naivete of our youth. Even 10 years ago, 20 years ago, I guess it is now. So my math is... Anyway, doesn't matter. It was about 15 years ago, but nonetheless, it was. You go into a little hot to trot. You think you still have that bravado of youth.
Yeah.
You think you can just take on the world, but when you step into this field, you really do have to have these extra measures, and I've seen it go bad for other teams. Not only. Some of the more legitimate ones on television, where they're constantly racked by something going on, like they took something home with them, like you almost did, Justin. That type of thing. And I've seen it with local teams too, when they were just at gung ho. So when she presented that to us, Henry and I both took it to heart, as silly as it initially felt, because I'd rather go in with it than without it. I'll put it that way. Right, so, do you guys have such a ritual or a protocol?
I think our protocol has kind of evolved from when we first started.
Yeah, it's different for both of us.
We
used to do like prayers in the white light thing in the very beginning.
Well, the prayers kind of came after we both did the cleansing ritual and both came back to faith. But when we first started, we had the St. Augustine medallions. We'd bought some bottles for holy water. Unfortunately, never got them filled. And then, as we progressed, I had met my ex-girlfriend at the time, and she had kind of taught us the white light thing. We hadn't really used it much before that. And then Eric had come full force back into his faith, so he was adamant on doing a prayer, which I was totally fine with. But when we went to a client's house with a little child, that was the first thing that Eric insisted we do, is say a prayer. And I'm like, yeah, absolutely, because I mean, regardless of what you're doing, the intent is there to stop whatever is there from harming you. So I think everybody else on the team was totally open to it as well, regardless of what their beliefs were. Yeah. But since then, I think we both kind of do our own thing to protect ourselves and go in full force with doing the investigation.
Gotcha.
Eric, I don't know if yours has changed as much, because I know we both still do the prayer thing kind of prior to.
Yeah. Well, so I'm a born again Christian, saved in 2009. So I very much believe I'm washed and cleansed by the blood of Christ, and the Holy Spirit fills me. So any situation I walk into, I already know I'm protected by the Spirit of God to begin with. But if I know I'm walking into a situation, I'm prepping for it, I usually go into prayer and do some fasting to really align myself with God and just be filled entirely by the Spirit. And I have noticed that sometimes it's, now this is, maybe there's other Christians out there who would experience this, but as someone who wasn't a Christian and then became a Christian and then has had a faith grown as it has, there have been times where, people walk into these places and they're like, this is haunted. Like, you need to witness this. And I walk in and just everything stops and there's nothing happening. And like, it's clear, it's clean, there's nothing there. And I'm like, sorry guys. Maybe I shouldn't be here if you guys want to investigate stuff. But it's happened like that a lot, where like I'm just not affected by things often anymore. I don't have like attachments don't happen. I'm not typically in an investigation. I'm not typically like teased or tormented by darker spirits or anything negative. Those things still show up in my own home, unfortunately. Like the whole reason that or the way I was led to faith was due to 3 months of demonic oppression. Where
Really?
Yeah. So if you want to hear that, I can share that.
So go into it briefly.
Okay.
I mean,
yeah, no, for sure. So back in 2007, 2008, I decided to delve into some demonology. And the very first book I decided to jump into was The Lesser Key of Solomon, which was written by, or at least forwarded by Aleister Crowley. And so, you know, this whole book is filled with magic spells and rituals to summon 72 different demons. Now, I thought nothing of it. I'm just enjoying this book. It's pretty cool. Well, one night, I forget how far into this book I am, but one night I go to lay down in bed, and you know that kind of stage where you're like almost asleep, but you're not fully asleep. You're like kind of aware still, but your body's just like, oh yeah, we're just gonna go, you know,
twilight sleep.
Well,
sure.
I was in that stage, and I had what I only can consider a vision. And it was just this very vivid image of I'm guessing a man's face, very elongated. His mouth was wide open. His eyes were just white sockets. He had long, white, stringy hair and tentacles kind of coming out of his face. And it was one of those things where, like, when I saw that, I was startled awake. I was like, well, that was weird. Well, for the next 2 weeks, I would have visions like it. Not necessarily that person, but various horrifying images that would just appear to me in that stage of sleep. That eventually grew into nightmares, and those nightmares grew into night terrors. And these were things where, like, you know, one dream, for example, my sisters were in hell, and the only way I could get them out was to take a dagger, split open my own stomach, and pull out my organs in the bottom.
That was in the dream?
That was in the dream.
Wow.
I had a vivid dream of a werewolf attack, just mutilating and destroying everybody in a particular house. I didn't know these people. I was just.
Were you the werewolf? Just out of curiosity.
No.
Okay.
No.
He wishes
in the dream. In the dream, rather.
Yeah. You know, and so these things would like happen, and as it would happen, you know, 3-4 weeks in, I started seeing things around the house. It began at night, where the side of my bed, the edge of my bed, would sink down as if somebody was sitting in it. I would have somebody touch my hair or my face. I would see these black masses standing at the edge of my bed, and this isn't like paralysis type things. This is like I'm wide awake, laying in bed at 3 a.m, literally, and there's this thing standing at the edge of my bed, just staring at me. One night, which was just like really spooked me, I was lying in bed. It was around midnight, and I heard what sounded like my dog trying to keep the tail out of the camera.
Sorry.
Always wants to be the center of attention. He's like, this story's enough. My
right.
I'm laying in bed at midnight, and I hear what sounds like a dog. One of my parents' dogs walking down the hallway. They had a wooden floor, and you know, when a dog walks on it, you can hear their claws, their nails kind of click on the floor. So I was like, okay, there's a dog walking down, and I'm looking under the door. There's a little nightlight on the other side, so I can see a shadow pass by. The shadow never passed by, and the footsteps stopped right at my door. And I'm like, okay, that's weird. Come on, dog. Right? Her name was Mackenzie. I'm like, come on, Mackenzie. Then all of a sudden, there's this deep guttural growl, and wind blows out of my face right at the side of my bed. And then I jumped way back. I was like, holy crap.
Yeah.
Like, what was that, right? And so it would just be this constant thing. It'd be nightmares, these entities, nightmares, entities. Then they started appearing during the day, midday, 3 o'clock. I remember coming home from work one day around 3 p.m., mixed a protein shake, was drinking it, looked out toward the living room, down a hallway, and there's this 7-foot mass kind of deteriorated. It's missing an arm, it's missing a leg, but it's standing there staring at me. And like, it took me a moment to process, like, what the heck am I looking at?
Okay. Wow.
And once I like just confirmed, like, yeah, there's something there, it turned around and walked down the hall. And so I chased after it. And of course, there was nothing at the end of the hall.
Like a logical person would do.
Right.
Right,
and I even
sure.
called out because my mom was
Why?
home at the time. You know, I was living with my parents. So I called out for my mom. She's in the basement. It's only she and I there. And then during the day, you know, there'd be voices, there'd be conversations happening in rooms and in places around the house when nobody's there. It's just me. And yeah, it went and went and went until it just was too much. And I happened to do this, this cleansing ritual that Justin's ex had showed us. And I did all the things where it was like mid-September, nighttime, like pitch dark, raining, it was pouring outside, nothing but shorts and a t-shirt, no shoes, no socks, anything like that, right? So we're out there and I'm like listing off all these negative things in my life on top of the demonic oppression or affliction. And at the very end, the one thing that we were supposed to like imagine putting this dark energy, this black energy into the ground and then calling for it to come back as white light. Well, instead of putting it into the ground like I was supposed to, and I don't know why I said this, I have no clue whatsoever, but instead I said, Lord, I place this all at your feet and just ask for you to return whatever is white and whatever is good. And I kid you not, the rain stopped, the clouds parted, and there was a full moon. And it was like the brightest full moon I'd ever witnessed. And I was filled with this joy that I did not know what it was, had no idea. And like all I did was I went on Facebook. I was new on Facebook back then because Facebook was very new. And I said, I just had an enlightening experience, and I posted it. And a friend of my sister's responded like, that was the Lord, and I'd like you to come to church if you're interested. And I was like, okay. And yeah, it was insane. And I still, there's an entity that I know by name that still taunts me here and there. It's kind of like this little chip on my shoulder, that's like, hey, don't forget I'm around. But thankfully there's no affliction. It's still like I'm protected by the Holy Spirit, by Jesus himself. So
that same night, didn't you feel like you were leaning up against somebody?
Yes.
Too?
Yeah, dude. Yeah. So that same night of the
we were doing like the angel or Saint Michael prayer or whatever it was.
So like during this meditation, I was just deep in it, and I leaned back and I wasn't falling backward. It literally felt like someone was leaning up against me, their back on mine, holding me up. And I had this vision during meditation of an angel, what I think was an angel, giant wings, and it was fighting these black masses that I would always see with some sort of sword. And like at the time, I knew nothing about, I grew up Roman Catholic, but that's not something that I would like refer back to because that was like youth stuff. So I had no idea what it was. I'm like, this is weird. This is really weird. I don't know who that is over there. And I don't know what's holding me up right now. But yeah, it all manifested into coming to know the Lord. And yeah, dude, it was insane. Like, and I said, again, ever since I've been like really focused on, if I could help anyone, it's helping them with demonic affliction or oppression. Like that's kind of the thing I do as an investigator now. I want to help people who are going through that type of stuff because there are a lot of individuals who don't understand it, know, and like I realized that I was put through that type of thing for a reason. At least I believe so. And so now in my walk, my faith walk, it's like, okay, well, I know why I went through all of that, and I can help these individuals. And thankfully I have been able to help individuals, which is super cool.
It is. It's fantastic when you can help people out. I've talked about the duplex on my show a gazillion times, so I'll give a super brief thing. This place had everything. And the poltergeist activity, orbs, full-bodied apparitions, phantom noises. On our investigation, I caught the sound, but not the visual, and I had my camera running right on the spot of what I call the demon monkey. It's this thing, you know how gorillas and chimps gallop when they run? They're kind of on all fours. They kind of go almost sideways. Well, this thing had no hair. It was monkey-shaped or chimp-shaped, but the skin was elephantine and gross, and it was so hunched over you couldn't see its head, really. As it gallops by, its back to me. See,
But let me just say, I'm sorry to interrupt, but let me just say there are two things you just said that I hate, and that is demons and chimps. So that sounds horrifying to me.
again, this is what I called it.
Never knew that
I'm just
about my
telling you what
cousin,
it
that he was
looked
afraid
like.
of chimps.
I don't like. I
Good to
don't
know.
Like chimps.
Good to know. So this creature gallops on down. I have it on, at least I hope I have it on camera. On playback, it didn't show up, but the sound was certainly there, and everybody heard this thing go. But we also had a full-bodied apparition step through a mirror and admonish my junior psychic for like 10 minutes and made her cry in the whole thing. I was very upset.
Wow.
And one of the, as we were leaving, I kept bumping my head on these paper lanterns. Everyone else in the house was kind of short. I'm 6 foot. I kept bumping my head on these paper lanterns they had hung up, and they were 5-point stars. Venal stars pointed up, but within them, they had a bunch of little other 5-point stars in various orientations. And every room in the house had a cross. Simple little brass cross, Christian family. And so you have a collision of ideas and things there. So I said, do me a favor. Before I leave, take down all these stars, fold them up, put them in the attic, whatever. Don't burn them. Don't throw them in the garbage and make them someone else's problem. You just fold them up and you put them in the attic and you forget about it. I get a call the next day. Tim, it stopped. Whatever you did, it stopped. I said, the only thing I did was tell you to take those stars down. I don't know how to cleanse a house, So I didn't do anything, on the sly or anything like that and cast out the evil. I just noticed the collision of energy. And it did the trick. So there's that too. So being able to help that family was probably the best feeling in the world, and really solidified our direction.
Yeah.
When as an investigative team.
I'll tell you what, there was I wouldn't even call it an investigation, but somebody reached out to Justin because he had still had the Night Stalker email, and he sent it to me because this woman was in Cleveland. And she was horrified. She was scared to death because she claimed there was a demon in her, not attic, but at the top of her stairs on the second floor of her house.
I think that's where her son was staying or living or whatever.
Yeah, her son was staying on the second floor, and she was afraid for him. She was afraid for herself, and she was very vivid with me. She told me it's a black mass that stands at the top of the stairs, looking down at her, has red eyes, and she sees it regularly. Her son has seen it. And so I'm going through all this stuff. I want to know. I do the typical investigative thing. What's your health like? And we get into the deep stuff like mental health, medications, family issues, all that stuff. Well, we kind of get all that through all of that. And I just tell her, like, look, I'm going to church tonight. This is Sunday night, so I'm going to church tonight. I've got a group of friends there who are going to pray with me over you and your family, and we're going to see what happens. And so I go and I get this group together. Even my pastor pops up, and like I wasn't very familiar with my pastor at the time, so he's just like, "Hey, what's going on here?" Big circle. Yeah, well, there's this woman who's dealing with this problem. We're going to pray. So we did. We all took turns praying, all of us in this circle. And my friend, and mind you, I told them nothing. All I said is this woman who's dealing with a dark entity, possibly demonic. That's it.
Okay.
And as soon as we finished the prayer, one of my buddies, who ex-military, absolutely wants nothing to do with demonic activity, ghosts, nothing. It scares him to death. Yeah. He comes up to me and he says, "Hey, I want to share. I need to share something with you." It's like, okay. He's like, well, while we were praying, I had like this weird vision of this, like, I can't explain it, like a black mass with these really bright red eyes screaming. And I was like, whoa, dude. Whoa. So I walked him through everything. And I reached out to this woman the next day. I was like, "Hey, how are you doing?" She's like, I can't explain it. Like everything, it feels lifted. Like everything feels light in this house. All of a sudden, I'm like, so, we had that whole discussion. And about 2 weeks later, she reached out again and said she started feeling like something was back negative. And so we had to talk, and it turned out that her mom, who she had a lot of issues with, who was also living at the house, she had gone like 3 days after this prayer, she had gone to the hospital and then had returned 2 weeks later. And now this woman is also battling with anxiety over her mom. So there's like, we had this demonic entity feeding off the anxiety of this woman who was dealing with issues with her mom while also dealing with a teenager who was witnessing this entity. So we kind of pieced things together. It's like, look, you need to don't get too, absorbed with this, because if you don't allow the Lord to just like walk with you, it is very clear in scripture that when a spirit is cast out of a place, it'll wander the earth, come back, find its home clean, swept up, and completely vacant, and it'll bring with it 7 more spirits more deadly or more evil than itself. And then it's all so much worse. And and that's my faith. That's what I believe. And so sure enough, she like started going to therapy and started working on things. I know. He's insane. He's like, I need my attention, please.
It's time for the sketches.
Yep. That's exactly what it is. But yeah, it was just wild. Like that experience, people who had no idea what was happening, witnessing something in a vision that correlated with what I knew and what this woman was experiencing, which is like, dude, that's just awesome.
That's awesome. That is outstanding. We are going to take a very short break. I'm just going to do it for 15 seconds. So we're going to take a station identification. We'll see you in 15 seconds. This is the United Public Radio Network, 107.7 FM in New Orleans and 105.3 in the Gulf Coast. UPRN talkradio.com. Esoteric programming at its finest. Okay, well, we got most of that out there. Hopefully that'll satisfy things. So when you're out there doing your investigation, you have your cameras, obviously, I would assume. Mm-hmm. Yes, probably still or video or both. Am I right so far?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay. Do you have an EMF meter with you?
Yep, absolutely.
Okay. And do you have voice recorders with you?
Yep, sure do.
Okay, good. What else do you bring with you?
We've got a ghost box, which I have turned into what we would call a portal. It's just hooked to a speaker, has a couple of guitar pedals on it for reverb and eliminating the white noise, if you will, so you're not hearing the so that really helps with the ghost box sessions, even though we haven't used it really as much. And then we had recently, in the past couple of years, bought a full spectrum camera, and have used that. I just recently bought dowsing rods to try out. I haven't not tried them yet. I really want to, because I've seen people have really good and really bad experiences with it as far as getting answers. I'm trying to think. I think that's pretty much it.
That and our handsome good looks. That's all we would take.
Yeah.
There you go. Oh, the kid's really making a star of herself right now.
Yeah.
Kind of funny.
He's like, "Who's you calling handsome? I'm handsome. Hold on."
I heard handsome. You must be talking about me.
If you hear me say monster, my two will come running, because that's all we call them is monsters.
Right on. Okay, so if you were, I bumped the mic. Really sorry about that. If you're, how do I put this? Let me ask a different question, or let me ask a question differently. Going out to a location, what would you say your most common location is? Houses, typically? Residences?
Yeah, I think so. I think we've done more residences than anything. We did do an investigation at a friend's business that is deemed for residential, but she uses it for her cookie business. We've done an investigation there, which is probably the only time I've seen Eric get so excited about it evidence that we're getting compared to anywhere else because it's just the two of us. So, he's not exciting anybody. And I'll go into that really quick. So we were downstairs. There was a party going on, which I didn't know was supposed to be going on at the time. I thought we were going to do an investigation. It was going to be quiet. The client would be involved. Clients would be involved. But the quietest part was the basement. So we go in the basement. We're doing some stuff. We got our EMF detector. We've got our IR camera. We've got EVP going. I don't think we really used the ghost box there, but we were doing kind of a EVP session, and Eric asked questions. I asked questions. We're getting kind of these spikes on the EMF detector. Go to debunk it. Can't tell what's causing it. We got close with our phones to see if maybe our phones were doing something because we had them in our pockets and silent. Nothing was doing it. So he was getting like super excited because this is the first time in a long time we've done an investigation and that we're getting such good responses. And
these were direct responses. We're asking questions
right.
And yes or no basically let up the EMF detector.
Right. And he was super excited about that, but he was also holding the infrared camera at the time. And he goes and pans and comes back. He's like, oh my gosh. And goes back and he's like, my friend has a Justin Bieber cutout with a wig on. And he didn't know where it was.
I thought it was something. I was so excited.
Thankfully, we didn't present it as evidence like we did in the other investigation. But he comes back, he's like, oh dang it, it's just Justin Bieber. And I'm like, what's going on? He goes, I thought I caught something, but it's just that stupid Justin Bieber cutout. I'm like, well, thankfully we know what it is before bringing it to anybody,
right?
And we did get a couple of weird EVPs on that. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, we got kind of a weird growl or something. Mm-hmm. And a couple of other things. Nothing so substantial that we could say, yes, it's haunted. No, it's not haunted. But it's like, there's these weird things going on. So maybe.
We're the type who needs like hard evidence before we tell someone it's haunted. Like, there's investigative groups out there who are like, oh, I caught two things. Boom, haunted. And like we need a significant amount, that just constantly stacks on top of the other. Like, okay, look at this pile of evidence we have. I think your house is haunted.
Yeah, and unfortunately, like Tim had mentioned on our show, doing investigations compared to the TV shows, you're not usually getting that much evidence, and if you do, it's very rare. But we. In that same week had done one for a friend at her house as well. I don't remember anything substantial other than same thing. EMF detector was kind of going off a little bit, but no EVPs, nothing on camera. And this person was having their cat just randomly just looking in the air at stuff. So that's why she wanted us to do an investigation.
Isn't that what cats do anyway?
Yeah, I mean, yes.
That's what mine used to do.
You gave us an opportunity to do an investigation, so we took it.
Yeah, sure. The cat's looking at something weird. Hey, okay.
Hey, it might be a ghost. Let us come over.
Some people say cats can see into the ghost realm as well.
Yeah, that's true. A lot of animals are able to do that. Apparently, this last client I had a couple of weeks ago, their dog. This dog is weird, man. it's half pit bull, half chihuahua. Like literally,
that's weird.
Like yeah, and it's like body of a pit bull, basically the super fat chihuahua, and then the head of a chihuahua. But it's just an augmented, weird looking little animal, very mutated looking. Sorry, animal. I'm just saying.
You can't tell if it's shaking or if it's growling. It's just...
No, it's just yeah, it's doing its thing, but it's always locked on this one point on the sofa where in front of so the dog's bed is in front of their sofa, and just won't stop growling and staring at that area. But that's not what got us in there. What got us in there was they have security cameras in their home, and they had sat down for dinner. It was maybe an hour after they had finished cooking, and they had enchiladas. Really good for the smell of it too. They had more that day while we were there. Again, you can't kick people out of their homes, so we're there at dinner time. But anyway, they had enchiladas, a spatula underneath the enchilada plate covered with foil, and on the camera you see the spatula lift out and then go onto the kitchen floor. And no manipulation, no strings, nothing. These guys come storming into the kitchen. What is that? And I looked around for hints of something like kinky, like did they have drill a little hole for a fishing line or something? Right. No, nothing. I think that was legit. And it was the first time there was object manipulation. They moved a chair into this doorway. I mean, the chair perfectly bisected the kitchen from the hallway, and this chair reared up. No one was around it. The dog was totally stationary, rears up and goes back down, and they all freak out and you go still like you do when you get scared. And so that was basically, you definitely caught something there. And then there was other things on top of that. So we were confident in saying, you definitely got something here. What it is, sure. I'm not too sure. My psychic identified one ghost that lived in the garage as Sammy, who was a field worker back when that whole area was orchard. And the orchard trees are still there from when that was orchard. That's
pretty cool.
Yeah. So it's on their property. It's on the fence line where there's other properties and stuff. But it was they definitely had something. Oh, and I remember something charged me. You ever get that feeling? I used to do like martial arts.
Running at you.
Yeah, you could feel it. There's a shift in the environment somehow, and you could feel something coming up behind you. And that happened to me. We were out in the backyard. We were on break. We weren't even trying to investigate. And something charges up on me, and I turn around. It's like, oh my God, what's going on? And I said, what the heck was that? Because there's nothing there. And it stopped. And my psychic says, something tried to come after you, dude. It's like,
that's wild.
What are we dealing with? So we may have to have another trip back to that place. But
yeah, for sure.
It was that was an intense investigation. There's just so many things happening there. Good times. But sorry, going back to my question. Sorry, I took over my own show. That's just stupid. When you're going back to my original question, I should hit pause. But when you're in a situation on an investigation, you go there based on not only what the client says, but I mean, shit, this lady sought us out too. I mean, it's not like we were talking at the store somewhere, because that's happened before too. Where you pick up a client at the most random places. She sought us out, got the phone number, made contact, so on and so forth. And then she says, and we got video evidence. That's a bonus. That's always great. Right. Even if I don't catch it myself. What gets you guys out there besides the request to come out and do some work? I mean, have you ever run into something where, that's someone's pipes? That's happened to me before. Or like, you have bad electrical, that's what's happening, or something like that. Have you guys ever run into anything like that?
Well, the cookie house that I was talking about, she does have a very old breaker box that goes down into the basement that we did detect like very massive EMF coming off of it. But it doesn't carry downstairs, doesn't carry out to the rest of the house. But to get us there, usually it's just evaluating what they're telling us. If we're doing stuff together, kind of doing a preliminary walkthrough before we're even doing the investigation. The one house we did had a child there, so it was surrounded. The activity was surrounded by this child, so absolutely we got there as fast as we could. And it was a referral from the people that had taken us with to the Jeffrey Dahmer house.
Okay.
So I think above all else, it definitely depends on the activity and what is really going on. Is there a child involved? Is there some type of demonic type activity going on? And maybe I'm speaking for both of us and I shouldn't be, but typically that's what we're doing. I'm used to you doing the same thing. Be quiet.
No, yeah, I mean, he's right. So it really depends on the situation. We evaluate the client's claims. We decide whether or not there's enough claim for us to actually go there and investigate it. If it's like, oh, I've noticed a door rattling one day, last week. Can you come check it out? It's like, well, no, I'm not going to waste my time over something that's probably just caused by the wind.
Right.
But if there's enough, if the client's given us significant things like, oh, the door rattled and then this item, I saw it move or I put it here and it moved, whatever. The other day, so the house I'm living in, it's the house I grew up in. It's also the house my mom grew up in. It has been haunted since she was a little girl. I have since cleansed it since moving into this house, but she experienced stuff growing up. Me and my sisters experienced a lot of things in this house growing up. And to this day, on top of course, the demonic activity that I dealt with, there are things that still happen here occasionally. And now this is an old house. It's 60 years old. So there is electrical issues. In fact, a year and a half ago, here goes the cat again. Just a reminder, guys, I'm still here. A year and a half ago, a lamp, a hanging lamp, like a chandelier in my kitchen started smoking, just pouring out smoke. Yeah. Got in there, turned electricity off, got in there. And sure enough, some of the wiring was deteriorated from years of just being there. So there are plenty of EMF issues here at times, but there's also things that are not caused by EMF, such as the other day I walked. If anyone's watching the video, my cat loves to appear.
The cat is in the picture. It's too funny. Okay, go ahead.
So we record our show every Wednesday. So Wednesday night last week, I walked out of here, turned off all my lights. I have a lot of lights on in here. I have a headlight on, ceiling light. Flip that off as I usually do. And then was it like 2 days ago? I think I texted you, Justin. So that was roughly Sunday, I think. Sunday, Monday. I walk up here, or I walk past like the stairs. I'm downstairs. This is the second floor. So I'm on the first floor and I walk past and I notice a weird light. And I'm like, did I leave the window curtains open, or the cats open? They like climbing on everything. So it's possible they opened up the curtains. But I walk up here and the curtains were shut. But the ceiling light was turned on, and the light switch, which happens to be like, if you can see it, Tim, but I have these display cases behind me full of things. I have display cases all around, and the light switch for the ceiling light is behind a display case. So you literally have to squeeze your hand between the display case and the wall to flip it on.
Gotcha.
Somehow, something turned on my light. The light switch was up. Don't know why. Don't know how. And I've been up here multiple times since our last episode that we recorded, and the light was not on because I do stuff in my spare bedroom. So, it was kind of like, okay, well, that's random. Salem, my other cat, not the one that appears in camera, he's a little more shy, but he will just be random. He'll be walking around, and then all of a sudden he freezes. he looks toward the hallway or toward a door, and his tail fluffs up and his back arches, and he just frozen staring at nothing. And I'm like, okay, and this has been happening since I've gotten him. So, you know, when it comes to cats who witness things or can see things, he's one who's very much in tune to something because it happens randomly. And I'm just like, weird. But yeah, with that said, like, you know, we're also always very aware of the situation people are going in. If a child is involved, it's no question we'll go just for the safety of the kid. But we also do very detailed questionnaires with the clients. And like I said, it's personal.
Yeah.
Like, what's their marriage like? Are you on medication? Have you ever been treated for depression or anxiety or any sort of mental illnesses? Have you been checked into hospitals? Like all that stuff. And it's not just asking, you know, whether they're on medication. We want to know what medication. So we're getting really personal. And of course, they have the option to decline and say, but most people, they're pretty, if they're serious, they'll be like, yeah, okay, here's the medication. And then we research it and we figure it out. And if it all lines up, we're like, okay, cool, we'll come. You know, if somebody's on some sort of antipsychotic because they're seeing things, for example, someone who might be either bipolar or something like that, that's something that has to come into question. Because if we go there and we don't see anything, is it possible that they're just seeing things that aren't there? You know, so it's very important that we have that information up front, and we will dig as deep as we can, even to the point of doing research on the properties and the surrounding properties.
Same, yeah. So, we're pretty thorough as well. It's interesting you mentioned mental dysfunction or issues. I shouldn't say dysfunction. I guess that's politically incorrect. But sorry about that, internet. But the our last clients had admitted to that, and had they not caught stuff on their own video, I would be more suspicious.
Right.
But given that they had, and it was clearly, you know, unmanipulated on their part, that's kind of what made it, you know, JJ and I say, yeah, let's give this one a shot. I mean, they definitely have something happening regardless of the other extenuating circumstances. So yeah, what is the protocol that you use to say no? I mean, are you dealing with pranksters? Are you dealing with people, like you said, who my door squeaks every so often? Or, you know.
Right. Yeah. I mean, one that I almost said no to. I didn't say no, but I almost said no to was the woman I had spoken about earlier with the demonic activity, the demon with the red eyes, because there was just so much happening with her psychologically that I was like, you know, anxiety, depression. She was on drugs at one point, alcoholism, you know, things like that. It's like, that's a lot, you know, and I can't, you know, I personally wouldn't feel comfortable going there myself, you know, without someone else with me. She's also the type of person who would talk about suicide, which, you know, I was someone she had just met.
Stranger,
suicide,
Right.
So I'm like, okay, well, that's an issue. Yeah. We need to contact somebody who a loved one, right? But nonetheless, you know, that's why I kept my distance. But I was like, look, I want to believe you. And I feel like there is maybe something at your house. Like I'm feeling something moving in the spirit. So let's pray. And I'll pray with my crew. And sure enough, like I said, the visions and all that happened. So there was something there. And had I not gone with my instinct or the movement of the spirit and just tried, she would possibly still be dealing with that same thing today. We don't know. But in cases in which we absolutely said no, or would say no, you know, I think that we have not said no to very many things.
No,
not very many at all. Because a lot of the things, investigations that we get are through other individuals we know. They're like handed to us, and we trust those individuals. So it's like, okay, you're asking us to do this, we'll do it. But yeah, I would say, like, definitely if it's something where the occurrences. Whatever it is they're witnessing has only happened for like a week straight or like a couple of days. Like that's not long enough for me to walk in and be like, okay, let's figure this out, because it's rare that it just pops open if they didn't do anything to open a door. If someone's like, well, this stuff has been happening for like 3 days, and then like, I'm like, well, what happened? When did this start? Like, well, it was after we were messing with a Ouija board. Okay, there's a good chance there's something there. It doesn't mean it's going to stick around. So let's give it another day or two. And if it's still there, let's figure it out. Because, a lot of people don't realize too, that when you open doors like that, these entities, they don't stick around very long for most people. The rare cases where it's like, hey, we're going to play with the Ouija board, or we're going to do this chant in the mirror, or we're going to, do some sort of playful seance. The rare cases, something happens, it enters through this door and it's there and it's pretty rough. But in most cases, you'll experience hair. I mean, you say hair standing on the back of your neck. That could be a natural cause, just you being scared. You might hear a knock on the wall or something like that. That's something just passing by. You opened a door crack, it came in, said hello, and it's going to leave. Like if there's nothing there to feed on, it ain't going to stick around.
Right.
But yeah, we do have obviously those cases that are pretty significant when people open those doors. And I'm one who has opened doors many times in the past. So it's, in those cases, it's like, okay, I feel like you probably.
And he still hasn't learned.
I still haven't learned. That's true. It's my burden to carry. I'm seeking psychological help.
Are you though?
Nope. I have too much fun with it.
Oh, I think. Hold on. I had a little cutout there.
Nope.
Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Yeah.
I hear you.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Fantastic. I lost you there for a second. Bizarre. Okay. And we're, thankfully we're not live, but still recording. But, okay. So, let me ask you, what got you guys involved in ghost hunting or paranormal investigation in the first place? I mean, was it an experience? Did you see it on TV and say, hey, I could do better than that? What happened?
So many things. So me growing up, I've mentioned, I used a Ouija board as a kid. I got into tarot. For a long time, I believed that I was psychic, but never really pursued it until I started talking to my ex-girlfriend and really opened myself up to it. But what really got us going in the investigation route was we would watch, Ghost Hunters. Supernatural, believe it or not, was a huge inspiration for us to start doing this stuff. We would sit around.
Outstanding. Go ahead.
We would sit around a campfire or just in the back at Eric's house, drinking beer and eating snacks and stuff, and just talking about random paranormal creatures, cryptids, stuff like that. So, the one day I'm like, there's got to be like an online radio station that we can get onto or something. And at that point, it's 2008. I had never heard the word podcast before.
Okay.
I don't believe Eric had ever heard the word podcast before, even though it had started apparently in 2006. And so I got on, did a Google search, and this website called Blog Talk Radio popped up. And I'm reading through stuff. I'm like, this is perfect. This is exactly what I was looking for. So around that same time we started the podcast, we also were like, you know what? We want to start including investigations that we've done into the show. So we ended up starting a paranormal investigation team on top of that. And that's kind of where that whole journey started as far as doing investigations, doing podcasting. Eric has had some other experiences outside of what he's already said that has kind of led him to that, but I'll let him tell that part of it.
Yeah. So for me, like growing up, it was a family tradition every single Wednesday to sit down and watch the X-Files together. So
Outstanding.
I was really young, and so one of my very first heroes, the person I looked up to, was Fox Mulder. Like I needed to look like him, I need to dress like him, I need to go to the back then it was go to the library because there was no like internet to just get onto. So I'd go to the library and look up all the X-Files magazines, and there would be all these magazines in front of me that just says X-Files, and there's Fox and there's Scully up there. And so my sisters and I, we were just in love with this whole idea of the paranormal and the supernatural, the weird. We would go out at night, like, back when kids actually went outside and did stuff. We would go outside and we would just like look up at the stars. We had these little notebooks that we wrote FBI in, and we pretend we were like Fox and Scully or, whatever. And we'd be investigating, quote unquote, investigating these things. All make believe, of course, but that kind of stuck with me and it grew with me as I started to learn about, the truth behind some of this supernatural stuff that I was, learning about on X-Files. As I said, this house that I grew up in is haunted, or at least was haunted. So there were a lot of things happening when we were kids. There were footsteps every night walking up and down our stairs, our basement stairs, and then from our first floor to our second floor, we would have lights flickering, door handles rattling. One night, this is pretty crazy. I didn't witness this, but my sister did. So this room that I'm in, which is my studio now, used to be my bedroom when I was a kid. My sister's bedroom, they had shared a bedroom. It was directly across the hall from me. So like if I look to my right, I can see that bedroom from here. Well, my bed was lined up so that the foot of the bed was facing their door. So basically I could look and see them and they can look and see me at night, right? We're kids. So it's like, we have that comfort. Well, one night my sister wakes up in the middle of the night and she sees me sitting up in bed. And she's like, Eric, are you okay? And there's no response. Eric, what are you doing? There's no response. So she gets up and she walks over to me. What I apparently kind of disappeared and I was just laying in bed, sound asleep. And like to this day, it still weirds her out.
Yeah.
So there was somebody or something sitting over me that looked just like me. That wasn't me.
Doppelganger.
Yeah. Right. So, but yeah, so we had this stuff happening all the time. We had, we would use the Ouija board in this house. The last time we ever used it, me and my sisters were trying to talk to something, and it was a darker entity, and the planchette started to get really hot, like oven or a stove hot, where we had to pull our fingers away because it was burning, and it freaked us out. And so my mom, she took it and she like, that's it, no more. She threw it away. She's like, you guys are done with this. But I had those experiences through all of childhood, and again, I grew up with this supernatural elements all around me. And it wasn't until I was probably around 22 that I really started to delve into it. Like, I mean, I supernatural started before then, so I was really into that and stuff. But it was finally like, okay, I want to learn more. Like, I want to actually dive in, do the research, figure out what all this stuff really is. And ultimately, after the demonic affliction that I went through, that's what really accumulated to this whole thing about the podcast and doing investigations. Like, now I know what's out there, and I want to help people, and I want to be able to share these things that I've learned over literally my entire life on podcasts. Like in the beginning, we didn't know what we were doing, but thankfully we had these opportunities to grow our show, and we've had 3 different versions together for this podcast. And so, it's like, here we are today, and it's been an awesome experience. It's been a scary experience at times, for sure, but that just tells, better stories, for sure. I'm all cool with scary stuff. Like, it's content now.
It's now, when you were first explaining this to me, it sounds like the podcast begat the investigations. Is that right?
Yes, it is.
Yeah. Okay. That's intriguing. I mean, you think it would be the other way around. Wow, we have so many cases and such cool experiences. We should talk about it.
No, it was just our pure interest. Yeah, it was just our pure interest in it all. It's like, look, we already do the research. We already talk to each other about it. Why not just share all that stuff with other people?
Yeah, yeah.
And as
I'm
we
all for
did
it.
that, Ghost Hunters had started. So we started watching that and we're like, oh, that looks fun too. Let's give that a shot.
Yeah.
And then we can talk about it on the podcast.
Yeah,
And so, yeah, that happened. And
That's awesome.
That's pretty much it.
And
That's
as
awesome.
Eric mentioned, our first iteration of a show was not very mature. We did joke around a lot. We had character voices on there. We had created a character called Demon Dave that I would just use a voice changer for myself and record and do that. And then we did have a call-in show at the very beginning and had a very interesting call-in that is not very PC FCC regulation worthy type stuff.
Gotcha.
But it was, I think it was the only time we've ever had a call like that, and we haven't had anything like that since we don't have a call-in show anymore.
Yeah, it scared us. Like, no more. That's weird.
And we have yet to figure out who it was, because I feel it was a prank by somebody we know, but yeah, couldn't figure it out.
Gotcha. So as you go, this is your second show? Is that correct?
This
is technically
the third together.
Okay.
Yeah. Because we had ParaTruth Radio, and then it's still the same show, but we rebranded it. We have each had separate podcasts as well. When we had Night Stalkers, I had broken off to go to a different network. So Eric literally killed Night Stalkers on air with sound effects, and came out with Forgotten Truth Radio, which was specifically a Christian view on the paranormal.
Oh, interesting.
And interestingly enough, it had really great feedback from people from all faiths. I was doing Parasite Radio on another network. And then both of those kind of fell apart. And later on down the road, we came up with ParaTruth. I had also been doing Beyond Reason while we were doing ParaTruth for a while, because I had kind of inherited that from a friend of mine. And then I kind of dropped that one too, because it was basically the same thing. We just didn't have the back and forth that Eric and I do sometimes about faith-based versus kind of mainstream view of the paranormal.
Yeah. So really, to sum up everything he just said, which also there's a lesson in this all too, believe it or not. We had a show together. Justin chose to leave and ditch me, left me on my own, but he came back and I forgave him. And now we're on UPRN. So forgiveness leads to really cool things.
Yeah.
Well, let's be fair. When I left the first time, you were very young in your faith again, and were kind of attacking some people, some guests. And I couldn't handle it, so I'm like, I can't do this. He has since grown so much in his faith and understandings of stuff that it's like, dude, you're not even the same person that you were.
Well, that was the whole point of when I did the show myself. I did Forgotten Truth Radio. It was the idea was to kind of test and see whether or not a Christian worldview, a scientific worldview, and then the views of various occults and cult practitioners could all find an even ground and just discuss things together like civilized human beings, instead of fighting over, well, it's science, or oh no, it's Christianity, or oh no, it's Wiccan, and so every week I chose something. There was one night where I did the Wiccan traditions. I discussed Wiccan religions, and I compared and contrasted them to Christianity, showed the differences, explained my reason why I believe the Lord is the Lord. And I would do that every single week. I would do that kind of stuff. And all of my listeners, none of them were Christian, literally Wiccans, Satanists, people who delved into various other occult like practices, they at first were a little like, this sucks. I don't want to hear this. But a few weeks in, these same people are now asking questions, and we're sharing experiences, and we're talking. We're not arguing. They're not believing everything I'm sharing, and I'm not believing everything they're sharing, but we're found a mutual ground. And it even came to a point where one day I was doing a discussion on, I think it was angelology, according to the scriptures. And somebody new came into the podcast to listen, and he was pretty upset with me because I was not condemning by any means, but I was just saying, like, here's why I believe Jesus is the way. And I'd always have this little preach at the end. And this person was like, well, he claims to be, you know, God-fearing and all this and that, but I bet I can harm him with this black curse that I can put on him, you know, let's see how manly he is once he gets cursed. Wow. And of course, like, everybody, the weekends of Satanists, all that, they all ganged up. Like, first and foremost, you don't belong here. You don't talk to him that way. Like, he's our people.
Wow.
And it was like something that just like, it filled me so much. You know, like, this is the first time people from a completely different faith, belief system, all that, stuck up for someone like myself who, and I get it, like, Christianity can be hard for a lot of people, hard pill. But these people, like, they realized that I was there to learn. I wanted to know what they were experiencing. I wanted to know what their lives were like. And it was like, I wanted to share my stuff too, you know? Yeah. And so it was really cool. And it didn't go long. It was like maybe a year or so before I finally was just like, you know, again, I'm a creative. So doing all the other nuances of podcasting got a little overwhelming for me. And I was like, okay, I'm done.
I get
but it was,
yeah.
So I welcomed him back as much as he welcomed me back.
Fine. Moral of the story.
Mutual welcome. That's awesome. That's outstanding. You touched on something that I kind of want to delve into a little bit for either of you or both of you together. What is your, for lack of a better term, well, let me put it to you this way. What are your convictions when it comes to things like UFO experiencers and alien visitation and that type of thing?
Well, actually, Eric was away for this episode, but he was the one that kind of found this guest that we had on. What was his name, Eric?
David Rufino. He wrote a book called Unholy Communion.
Yeah. And basically in the book, it basically is talking about how UFO visitations or extraterrestrial abductees, if you will, are not being abducted by aliens. They're having a negative entity, demon, whatever experience, and they're masquerading as extraterrestrials. That was the first person outside of Eric, of course, who made me kind of think about it a little bit, that maybe not all of these experiences that people are having with extraterrestrial experiences are having ones that it's actually extraterrestrial. Maybe it's more of a spiritual attack of some kind. And I'll tell this story, and Eric can tell his story about possibly, I'm going to say possibly being abducted. But a couple months ago, I had this experience. I was asleep, woke up randomly, and felt like there was somebody in the room with me. Never have really had this happen before or since. But I had anxiety about it, and I had a hard time falling back asleep. Fell back asleep, woke up, and had 2 marks on both sides of my hand, almost like there had been something pushed through, because it was like identical on both sides where the mark was.
Like a blood blister almost.
Almost looked like, yeah, and possibly was, but it was interesting that it happened on both sides of the hand. And after that, for a very long while, I wasn't having pain in my knees and feet like I normally would. My anxiety that I had had for a very long time was gone. And couldn't explain what happened, but it was one of those things that made me even closer to a believer that there is some type of activity happening. What that is, yeah, still not really sure, but I'll have Eric share his experience.
Yeah. Well, there's a few things. I mean, first and foremost, I think a lot of the UFO settings that we have, there legitimately seem to be some sort of actual mechanical device of some sort. It's something out there that is a solid thing. You know, I've had people say, "Oh, it's just portals opening up," or it's spiritual warfare, some sort of illusion. But there's enough evidence, I think, to support that there is something physical there, and that these objects are indeed metallic in nature in most cases. So it's something physical. I do want to run over David Rufino real quick and his book on Holy Communion, because I think that's important to just kind of share why it had Justin thinking about whether or not these are possibly demonic entities. So David Rufino was a pastor and researcher in the UFO and abduction conspiracies. And so he had dealt with and talked with a number of different abductees. He would interview them and spend days to weeks with these people. And then he would start to test them by doing his own investigations. And one of the things that he had learned over the course of roughly, I think, 2 or 3 years of these experiences and these interactions with people is that when he would proclaim the kingdom of Christ over these individuals, and he would command the alien entities to disperse, to leave, these people would never see an alien entity again. They would never be abducted again. They would have peace. There would be no fear. So he related the idea that if these entities are, let's say, creatures, humanistic to some extent, they would have no reason to flee by the name of Christ. But if there are spiritual entities, then according to the scriptures, everything under the kingdom of heaven, especially spiritual, must obey the commands of Jesus and Jesus's name. And these entities did. So they must be demonic by nature. Now, with that said, and though I do believe that there are plenty of entities that are demonic, and maybe they are all demonic, I don't know. I like to leave an open mind to other possibilities. I'm not one who's willing to just close off completely. But there's also this idea of the Nephilim in Genesis 6. God sent the flood because of the Nephilim. However, after the flood had happened, the waters receded, we see later in history that the Nephilim still existed. How can that be? My theory is that the Nephilim, who are also the gods of old, these are the same beings who potentially helped build the pyramids, who helped to create technologies that we don't know or can't even consider building today. These entities built escape pods, quote unquote UFOs, left Earth, because these are half human, half angel hybrids who are capable of way more than we can ever understand. And they got away from the flood. And after the waters receded, they came back. Some stuck around, became new gods, quote unquote gods. And others stayed out in space and they visit from time to time. So these things that we're seeing in the skies could be demonic entities of some sort. They could be Nephilim potentially. But again, we talked to there's a person that I talked to a long time ago. He was a Christian man. His name is Jesse Marcel Jr. Anyone who knows who Jesse Marcel Sr. is, he is the man who was first on scene of the 1947 Roswell incident. When talking to Jr., who had written a book about his father and all the things that he had brought home with him, the things that he saw as a kid, I had asked him the same question, like, what do you think these aliens are? Do you think there's aliens? And he's like, well, and put it this way, to say that these things exist would be to assume that God created something outside of humanity, which goes against everything written in the Bible, other than angels and, that lives on earth. However, to say that aliens don't exist would be to restrict the creative power of God. It's possible he created other entities We don't know. Just because they're not written in the Bible doesn't mean they don't exist. He doesn't talk about every single spiritual entity in the Bible, but we know there are plenty of other spiritual entities out there. So, I think for me, it's like still up in the air as to what they are, but I do think they are very legitimate things. These are things that people are seeing. And I think they are literally, quote unquote, aliens because they're extraterrestrial. And we know that God himself is extraterrestrial because extraterrestrial defined is not of this world, something that doesn't exist on Earth. So they're coming from outside of Earth, whether that's another plane, whether that's from space, you name it. With all that said, I did have my own experience as a kid. It was nothing spectacular, nothing crazy. But I it's weird. I don't know what happened prior. I only remember what happened afterwards. I was sleeping in my bedroom, and the only thing I remember is a super bright flash of light. And it was such like, that doesn't seem like much, but I woke up screaming, blood curdling screams over a flash of light. And this is something I've meditated on so many times over the years. Like, why would a flash of light scare me? But ever since that day, and I was about 6 years old. So think about that. I'm going to be 39 in a week, less than a week.
Okay.
So that's a lot of years to contemplate this. And ever since I was 6, I believed it was something alien and extraterrestrial. Don't know why. Don't know how. I believed it was an abduction. Can't explain it. But I've always believed that. And I always think about why I was screaming. I can't remember. I don't know what happened prior to that flash of light. But I think something happened that in that moment was there in my mind that scared the daylights out of me, but then was immediately zapped away and has been suppressed ever since.
Have you ever done any reverse?
No, sir. I've thought about it. I've thought about it. And then I'm like, do I want to know? Like, part of me does, but, and who knows? We'll see. Maybe, there's still plenty of time, hopefully, God willing, in the future here for me to do it. It has been something I've considered. Just haven't taken those steps yet, but yeah, it's definitely.
That is a frightening understanding to come to, I would think, especially if you're recalling that young memory where you don't know. The unknown is frightening. It really is.
And that's the thing,
and
like,
I guess.
Yeah. It's just like, being 6 years old, like I have a lot of memories, but very few are as vivid as that one. And it's like, how is that thing still burned in my mind after all these years? It
was significant.
Yeah.
So, okay. Interesting. So my next question, and you guys said you've discussed this, same basic question, but let's relate it to cryptids, Bigfoot, Loch Ness Monster, the fact that some people swear up and down we still have dragons flying around in the air, dinosaurs still existing in certain areas of the world. Yeah. Where do you stand there?
Eric, I'll let you.
Yeah, no, for sure. I think it depends, first and foremost. When we talk about things like Bigfoot, for example, I am under the impression now that he is a spiritual being. Some say extraterrestrial, which is fine too. Again, I just talked about the definition of that. But I do think he's a spiritual being because of how quickly he can disappear and how every image of him tends to be fuzzy, as if he's disrupting the technologies somehow, the waves. And I feel the same way about many other cryptids that are similar by nature, werewolf-like creatures, even quote unquote werewolf. We'll say dogman. I don't believe in werewolves. Werewolves are creatures that can shapeshift from human form to werewolf to the wolf-like form, right? I don't believe that's possible,
right? At
least not physically. Spiritually, that's a whole different subject matter. We need another hour for that. But yeah, dogman.
Yeah.
So I think some of these entities are definitely spiritual, but I think there are others that very much could be legit. And the dogman actually is one of them that I do think could be legit, because I never released it, but I started doing my own little podcast last year. I wanted to just create something small, short-based, that just told stories of the heartland. That is a certain set of states within the U.S. The very first episode that I wrote and recorded was about the dogman, and so I dived into the research. And of course, when you think of modern dogman, something very horrifying. But when you look through the research, like through the history, you see dogman-like creatures in ancient Egypt. But there were also dogman-like creatures in Israel at one point. And there's a lot of references to these entities, these beings being able to talk like humans. And there's even been stories of people who've witnessed a dogman talking with a human, like I'm very roughly human, it's still very growly and guttural, but it was still able to speak words. And so when you're looking at the history of the dogman and how far back it extends, or the idea of the dogman, then I think there's significant evidence to support the real life modern version of a dogman who's still living, somewhere in the forests of anywhere in the world, right? I mean, our forest, we don't know everything about our forest. We have not navigated every single part of the forest in Earth. There is so much that has been undiscovered and so many places for these creatures to hide. And same goes with some of these water creatures. Loch Ness is a little different, I think, but there are other sea-like creatures that have been considered. And we know that not all the depths of the oceans have been able to be discovered. We're not able to reach those depths at times. And there are entities or creatures that could potentially live at those deep depths. Even like, I'm one who refers to the Bible a lot. You think of Leviathan, for example. This is a creature that very much sounds like a real legitimate sea monster. Maybe it really did exist at one point. We still have people claiming they see these dragon-like creatures living in the waters, serpent-like creatures. And we know that there are many animals who have gone extinct many years ago who are just now being found again, who are being seen. Like, why is an animal who's extinct 15, 20 years ago all of a sudden showing up? It's because there's these places where they hide. And it reminds us that means if these entities or these creatures that are extinct are still living, then it's very possible there are other creatures that have lived longer and are hiding deeper in places that we've not been able to reach.
That does make a ton of sense. I'm reminded of, on the less cryptid side of things, the puffin. The bird, the puffin.
Yeah.
Thought to be extinct for like 25 years, and suddenly they showed up in force, about, 20, 30 years ago.
Yeah.
Look at the Tasmanian tiger, too. I mean, a lot of proof that there are still some in existence.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, they captured it recently, right, on a trail cam or something.
Not too long ago, yeah. And the whole dragons, there's a lot of people supposedly catching dragons on videos right now. I would love to believe that dragons are real. I've always been a dragon guy. Eric knows this. One of the very few creatures that in almost every single area of the world has some type of dragon type entity attached to it. Bigfoot's another one where spread throughout the world, as Eric said, Dogman too. As much as I would love to believe these things and all the evidence that points that it's very possible, I try to stay on the skeptical side of things just because, and me and Eric have had this conversation on our show, without a dead body, offspring, anything like that, we're not going to say, yes, these things are real. I will always say it's very possible. It is very, very possible. And I would really like to see a living dragon in my lifetime. But is it going to happen? Probably not.
He's a big fan of dragons.
But like Eric said, even with the sea creatures, or as we've kind of talked about before, Megalodon, who was around in the Jurassic Mesozoic times, there are people that saying teeth are still washing up on shore. How can these still be washing up on shore if all these creatures are dead? So,
yeah, I mean, you could explain that. I mean, if there's an earth shift, some sort of seismic activity could shake some stuff loose, and they start washing up with the tide. But there's all and you mentioned Leviathan. That's often depicted as a giant octopus, and they are out there for real. We've been finding them rather recently. Giant squid as well, all thought to be legends up until like the last century, give or take. So it's fascinating to dwell on some of these aspects that where you have the Bible, which is probably one of the more, I mean, granted, it was written 300 years after Jesus died, but most of those religious texts kind of follow that same suit. But you have the unique thing about, I'm Catholic too, and one of the unique things about the Bible that I heard someone else say, this isn't my quote, but it seems to be, and maybe the Old Testament as well, so talk about the Torah. In that case, it seems to be all a bunch of eyewitness accounts fused together over time. Which is interesting in and of itself. And never mind, you have letters from different saints and they were apostles back then, but they became saints. But so it's fascinating. I don't see that in no offense to my listeners out there, in Islam. I don't see that in the Quran. I see someone just kind of espousing things based on what he heard from a single entity that he claims is Gabriel. So with regard to those religious texts in general, we have something else happening. We have the Bible mentioning great beasts at one point that were in existence, and then after the flood they were taken out. Right. In the Quran, interestingly enough, they explore far more in depth the elements of heaven and hell and various demon archetypes and stuff like that as part of the education of religion. And when I was going to Catholic school, I didn't go very long. I wasn't very good at it. There was this basic lesson that God is good, great, and awesome, and you do right by yourself and by your fellow man, you're going to heaven. If you fall into evil sides, you're going to hell. That's it. That was the lesson. So the takeaway is that with regard to religion explaining some of our more esoteric creatures on this planet, whether they were imagined or not, I find it interesting that there's still congruency throughout the different centuries that in which these texts were laid down.
Yeah, 100%.
I had a point there, but I kind of got away from me.
No, no, I agree with you completely. And like I said, I grew up Roman Catholic, became born again. And then I originally wanted to be a pastor, so I have an associate's degree in religion. And, I think it's really interesting that Christianity doesn't teach much on that of like demonology and angelology unless you're actually going to be a pastor. Like you have to take those courses. But I think one of the reasons why, and I see a lot of Christians stray from that type of thing, that sort of, let's not talk about the devil, let's not talk about demons. And part of it is fear, yes. But I also know that throughout scripture, we are told to trust in the Lord our God, to worship the Lord our God, and lean not on our own understanding. Do not have idols. Love the Lord. And unfortunately, myself included, before I became saved, I was dwelling on demonology. That's how I got into the whole demon affliction thing. Like I was idolizing something that, I didn't understand. And I still fell into that on occasion. I still fall into that on occasion. Like I'm human. I'm a sinner. Like that happens. And so, the reason we don't talk about that in Christianity as much is to prevent us from becoming victim to the idolization of something that we shouldn't be focused on. We should be focused on the Lord himself. And I believe, again, be good. It's like the one thing I love about Catholicism is the idea that, if we're good to our fellow man, we do good by them, we do good by God, we love God, then boom, we're going to be in heaven. Which I hope not to offend you. I oppose that idea. Because the scripture says, like, how do we get into heaven? Love the Lord your God. Believe in Jesus. Period. You don't have to do the work. You don't have to bend over backwards. Don't need to hurt yourself trying to get into heaven. There's nothing you can do to get there. There's no work to be done. Jesus has already done it on the cross. Believe in the Lord your God. Believe in Jesus. Done. And what people don't understand is when you do that, when you believe in Jesus and the Holy Spirit fills you, you naturally start to do good works because it's a conversion of your spirit. Like, I don't have to work. I want to work. Like, I enjoy it. I enjoy helping people because the Holy Spirit is like, hey, this is what we do. We're going to go out. We're going to make disciples. We're going to love people. And so that's the big differse between, like, I only say that, like,
kind of ask you to wrap it up.
Yeah, for sure. So, and I know we're getting closer, but yeah. So, but I agree. Like, everything between, like, dinosaurs, dragons, monsters, all that, you can be correlated through various religions throughout history. Christianity, Buddhism, Islam. There are things that correlate, and I think that should be enough for not only us, but scientists who are coming out saying, "Oh, it don't exist," but then finding otherwise in their own investigations.
Right, and that's the funny thing; it always comes back to bite them to one degree or another.
Yes,
gentlemen, yes. I gotta wrap it up. We should definitely do this again. Keep on trucking on this whole idea. Eric, Justin, tell them about Paranormal Truth.
That's you.
Yeah, ParaTruth Reborn. You can find it pretty much everywhere. YouTube, any of the podcatchers, and we're pretty much on all the socials. So
definitely find them here on UPRN for sure.
Yep.
So without further, thank you so much for being on the show. I really appreciate this. This was a great part two.
Thanks for having us.
Great part two.
Yeah.
Absolutely. My pleasure. Okay, so let's wrap this up, ladies and gentlemen. This has been Paranormal Insight. I'm Tim Sudano, and we'll see you next time. I should warn you, actually, I don't need to warn you about that. Don't worry about it. It's all good. All right, until next time, take care, everyone.